Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all of you joining us online from around the world. We're delighted to be here with you today for today's important webinar in the lead up to Nutrition for Growth in Paris 2025. My name is Gráinne Maloney and I'm a Senior Nutrition Advisor with UNICEF and our representative on the Nutrition for Growth Outreach Working Group who's hosting today's webinar. And I'm based in New York in our headquarters. And I'm passionate about all things nutrition, as I'm sure are all of you joining us online. Now, today's webinar is focused on mobilizing commitments for Nutrition for Growth, and it's the second of two webinars. We had one yesterday for different time zones. And our webinar today aims to equip country stakeholders with the tools and the information and the resource needed so that you can develop strong commitments in the 2025 N4G Summit. Over the course of the next 90 minutes, we will unpack the Nutrition for Growth Commitment Guide, which is available in English and French. We will also unpack many other useful resources and tools, and we will guide and answer some questions. As mentioned, this webinar is being hosted by the Nutrition for Growth Outreach Working Group, and we work together to support the mobilization of country commitments ahead of the N4G Summit. And our members are Action Against Hunger, Concern, FAO, the Global Nutrition Report, IRC, Nutrition International, Results, Save the Children, the Sun Civil Society Network, the Sun Movement Secretariat, UNICEF, the UN Nutrition Secretariat, WFP, WHO, and the World Bank. So that's the group who's hosting today. And we're happy also today to offer interpretation in Spanish. Please choose your language under interpretation. You'll see the little globe at the bottom of your screen and select the channel of your choice, either English or Spanish. I'd also like to say that we are happy to say that this session will be recorded and the recording will be shared in due course along with the slides. So you will have these resources available to you in the coming days. Now, if you have any questions, please, throughout today's session, we will have a number of speakers. So if you have questions for any of our speakers, please use the Q&A box again at the bottom of your screen. And we will have two Q&A sessions throughout the session today. And we will do our best to respond to as many as we can over those two sessions. And also, please, now as we're starting, we'd love to know who you are and where you are. So please introduce yourself in the chat. And we look forward to hearing what you're doing, which country you're in, and the role that you're playing in supporting commitment making in your context. We have over 100 people online, so we are delighted now to move on to our next session. We have an eminent panel of speakers today who will talk you through this agenda. So the first agenda item is on engaging in the N4G. What do we know about the summit so far? And for that presentation, we will have Johan Schomburg, who is the coordinator of the Interagency Group Secretariat, or the AISU N4G. Then the second session we will move on to after Johan will be navigating the commitment guide and various related resources and the thematic guides. And that will be Marie Durling, who's a nutrition advocacy advisor at WFP, will be taking us through that session. For the third session, we will have Barbara Rabinder, who is the Deputy Head of the Sun Civil Society Network, and she will be talking us through, again, different resources and mobilizing and amplifying ambitious commitments. And then we will hear from a country experience. So we will be hearing from Edgar Okoth Onyango, who is the National Coordinator of the Scaling Up Nutrition Civil Society Alliance in Kenya. And Edgar will talk us through what they're doing in Kenya to make ambitious commitments. Now, that will be 4 intense sessions with a lot of information. So at that point, we will open to a Q&A. So make sure to post your questions during the sessions, and then we will aim to address as many as we can during that first Q&A session. Following the Q&A session, then we'll move on to a really key, vital presentation, because it's important, obviously, to talk about the commitments, but unless they're registered, they won't be, we won't be held accountable for those commitments. So what is the process of how to register those SMART commitments in the Nutrition Accountability Framework? So we will have Carrie Hubble Malgarejo, who's the Program Director with the Global Nutrition Report, who will be talking us through that process and providing plenty of tips and insider information on that process, so that you leave this webinar with all the information and tools that you need to actually register your commitments online. Finally, after that last session from Carrie, then we'll have a second Q&A, and it's an opportunity to answer any questions that you have on the registration process. So we are now going to kick off with our first presentation, and I'm going to hand over to Johan. So Johan, do tell us what's happening on the N4G Summit. Thank you, and over to you.
Thank you, Granier. So good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Johan Chambo, and as Granier said, I oversee the Secretariat of the N4G International Advisory Group, also called ISU, which is the international arm of the N4G Paris governance. I will start with this webinar by giving you a brief overview of the vision for N4G Paris, a document developed by the French Ministry of Europe and Foreign Affairs with input from the International Advisory Group. The document is publicly available on the N4G website, and the link will be put in the Q&A. I will also give an overview of how to engage in N4G Paris from the two-pager document developed by the outreach group for country stakeholders. So about the vision, N4G Paris vision. Most of you here are very familiar with the global situation on nutrition and the challenges that N4G Paris aim to address. Nutrition is fundamental to human and social development. Enshrined fundamental rights, it is essential for the health and well-being of populations and plays a crucial role in economic growth, poverty reduction, and resilience to climate change and other shocks and other development goals. It is directly linked to the achievement of SDGs 2 and 3 and has an impact on the achievement of 11 of the other 15 SDGs. But malnutrition remains, as we all know, a major challenge, and it is affecting all countries, which is also a crucial element of the vision of the N4G Paris, is that all countries are affected by nutrition, and therefore all countries are invited to make commitments. So many countries are facing also a double burden of malnutrition, which, as you know, is a coexistence of various forms of malnutrition, undernutrition, overweight, and obesity, which are risk factors for diet-related non-communicable diseases. The world is facing multiple crises that hinder progress towards the Sustainable Development Goals and have impeded progress in ending malnutrition. As the UN Decade of Action for Nutrition comes to an end, and we are 5 years to the SDGs, accelerating the mobilization of funds and the implementation of actions to improve nutrition is urgent and critical. Recognizing that investing in nutrition is a highly effective investment, the government of France is hosting the Nutrition for Growth Summit in Paris in March 2025 and calling for decisive and bold political and financial commitments to scale up our ambition in the fight against malnutrition in all its forms and accelerate progress towards the achievements of global nutrition targets by 2030. N4G is the main global pledging moment for nutrition, happening every 4 years. The last summit in Tokyo in 2021 mobilized 27 billion in financial commitments and generated 396 new nutrition commitments in 78 countries. N4G Paris called for a qualitative and political shift from one-off increases in humanitarian funding for nutrition to an effective, efficient, and sustainable long-term effort based on scientific evidence to prevent and control all forms of malnutrition. N4G Paris is thus a key opportunity for revitalizing momentum and action for nutrition and generating new funding and investment in nutrition along with ambitious political commitments. So the four objectives of N4G Paris that are outlined in the vision are: first, to put nutrition at the heart of the sustainable development policies through coordinated action across sector and across political processes. Two, to make the fight against all forms of malnutrition a universal cause, as nutrition is a fundamental human right and no one should be left behind. Three, create continuity between past and future N4G summits and establish a continuous trend to expand commitments to good nutrition. And last, to maintain a high level of political and financial commitment from multiple stakeholders at national, regional, and global levels. Next slide, please. So the summit will generate a coordinated set of new commitments from a wide range of stakeholders, including governments, donors, international organizations, civil society organizations, philanthropies, the academia, and others. All types of organizations are invited to make a commitment as long as they respect the principle of engagement. It is an opportunity to make nutrition visible, to gather a broad range of stakeholders through multi-stakeholder platforms for nutrition when they exist, and collaborate in a transparent process on the development of ambitious commitment to achieve national and global nutrition goals. Stakeholders are encouraged to address the multi-dimension of nutrition through integration of nutrition across sectors. 6 thematic areas were identified for N4G Paris, and the international governance has developed thematic recommendations to guide commitment makers. These themes are nutrition, health, and social protection, nutrition and transition towards sustainable, climate-smart, and resilient food systems, nutrition and resilience to crisis, nutrition and gender equality, nutrition data research, artificial intelligence and innovation, and financing and accountability for nutrition. My colleague Marie will provide more detailed information on how to prepare commitments for N4G Paris and packing the available guidance. Next slide, please. So how to engage for stakeholders that are based in countries. N4G presents the unique opportunity to address gaps in national nutrition plans, revisit the targets, bring nutrition higher in the agenda. As country stakeholders, UN, civil society, organizations, you are encouraged to come together in a coordinated way, including with French embassy in your countries that are in the lead for the mobilization, to support the host government in making ambitious and smart financial and political commitments at N4G Paris. This can be done by disseminating existing resources and guidance that you will hear about today, revisiting past commitments, especially those from Tokyo, if your country had made one or some, and assessing progress, gaps, and opportunities for a new set of commitments. Encouraging the engagement of relevant government counterparts and stakeholders involved in the 6 thematic areas in the commitment formulation process. And supporting inclusive discussions on the formulation of a set of strategic smart commitments. The engagement needed may differ if your country is part of the Sun movement or not. The Sun movement secretary has provided guidance and information to the Sun government focal points. In most Sun countries, a dedicated technical assistance provider is also supporting the process. So if you are in a Sun country, the Sun government focal point is the convener for the preparation of commitments through the Sun multi-stakeholder platform. So reach out to the Sun focal points if you haven't yet and wish to engage in the process. It is already ongoing. Join the process in place and contribute to the discussion and reflection with the unique inputs and perspectives your organization bring. In 17 countries, there is no dedicated technical assistance provider, and your organization may wish to offer more in-depth support on the commitment formulation process based on the needs identified by the governments. In non-sun country, sorry, next slide, please. Thanks. In non-sun countries, the support can involve reaching out to government nutrition leads and key nutrition actors to brief them about the summit. They would likely have received less information about the summit than in some countries, except for those that are in the international governance, and may require more in-depth briefing. When reaching out, do it in a coordinated manner with other country stakeholders and with the French embassy. Use the existing resources that will be presented to you today to brief them. You can also help in coordination with the French embassy to ensure invitation reaches the right person. Contact the French embassy to confirm invitation to the summit and help follow up through your usual contact to confirm it has reached the right person in the government. The invitation from the French embassy will be sent to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, which can transfer it to the appropriate minister in your country. While participation of countries is limited, all countries are invited to make a commitment. In coordination with other stakeholders, consider offering your support to the host government for unpacking the resources and guide the process of formulating commitments. Next slide, please. So I will now briefly present you the overall structure of the summit and the main building blocks which were presented to the International Advisory Group. The planning for the main summit conference is being defined and structured around plenary sessions and roundtables. The plenary sessions align with the thematic areas of the summit I presented earlier, while roundtables will be on nexus, cutting across different themes to break the silos of the thematic structure in place. There will also be a village of solutions for nutrition, inaugurated and opened to the public on 26th of March, one day before the main conference, where innovative solutions to fight malnutrition will be presented. There will be 30 booths in the space. The list is not yet available, but will be communicated soon. A series of side events, which have just been selected after a call for application, should also be shared with and made available publicly shortly. They will be organized throughout the week from Monday to Friday, Monday 24 March to Friday 28 of March. Two inside events also will be part of the summit, a scientific conference led by the AFD, French Development Agency, with French research institutions, and a finance in common inside event for the development banks. Finally, Nutrition is Everyone business, an outside event organized by the Paris Peace Forum with Atney and Gain will be also happening at the same time, not part of the official summit for the private sector. More information on the program will soon be made available on the N4G Paris website. Thank you, and back to you, Grenier.
Thank you so much, Johan. There was a lot of very valuable, insightful information there on the process. And just to let all our participants online know, we will be sharing the slides and all of the links to the documents that Johan made reference to. They will all be shared after today's webinar. And indeed, we had a similar webinar yesterday in French. So we will also be sharing the French version, so that you can listen to it in the comfort of whichever language works for you. So look out for that. Unfortunately, our chat is disabled, so we are unable to post links, but we will share all the appropriate links with you in the coming days, along with the recording. Now, moving on to our second speaker, I'm delighted to invite Marie. Marie is going to take us through the existing resources and what type of information is there to help us in our process of commitment making. Marie, over to you.
Thank you so much, Grania. Good morning, good day, and good afternoon, good evening, perhaps as well. I know we have people from all over the globe listening into this webinar. So I'm delighted to take you through the documents that are available to support commitment making at this summit. So there are a couple of different documents that have been developed to support commitment making, and these have been developed under the leadership of the government of France with the N4G International Advisory Group, which includes stakeholders from international organizations, governments, civil society, and other nutrition actors. And the purpose is really to help different stakeholders who want to develop comprehensive, smart commitments that will achieve real change in nutrition. And the reason to provide this guidance is to kind of, the smarter, the more specific, the more ambitious commitments are, the more change they will really lead to. So there are one overarching commitment guide, which is available online currently in English and French. And then there are 6 thematic annexes that will very shortly be available. There will be a summary version available later this week, which summarizes these 6 thematic annexes. And we do know that it can feel a bit daunting with so many documents, a lot of text, quite dense. So we want to help you unpack what they all contain and how they can be used. And really these documents, there is no need to kind of read all of them back to back like you would read a novel. Of course, you can do that if you want to, but you can also really kind of use them as tools and kind of open them, go to the sections you need, skim the others, and go back and forward and kind of use it as a practical tool when needed. Next slide, please. So starting with the overall N4G commitment guide, I want to kind of highlight what you can find in this document. So it contains some kind of overarching guidance on what does it mean to make a good commitment and how would you develop those. It also contains some recommendations that are specific to making commitments in the Paris 2025 summit. It also contains kind of overall guidance. What does it mean to make a smart commitment? And you know, specific, measurable, achievable, all of that I'm sure you all know. But what does it mean in the context of N4G? And then it also contains a section with recommendations on holding inclusive national consultations on commitment formulation. It contains guidance on how to register commitments in the Nutrition Accountability Framework, or the NAF. And it contains as well principles of engagement for stakeholders who will make commitments. Next slide, please. So the guide, it starts out with giving some overall recommendations that applies to all commitments at the summit. Johan has mentioned some of them already, but overall to say commitments can be financial or they can be political. And political means essentially every commitment that is not financial. So it can be programmatic, policy, or similar. Commitments should also align as much as possible with the 6 N4G themes that Johan has mentioned and that I will also go into very shortly, but also really encouraging holistic approaches. So not kind of, as we know, to achieve real change in nutrition, because nutrition is a multi-sectoral issue, you need to kind of address it in a coordinated way across different sectors. So this is also really encourage that approach for nutrition commitments at N4G. A key focus as well that the French government is encouraging is to focus on integrating nutrition in sectoral plans. So for example, in health sector plans or social protection plans or agriculture plans, etc., as we know that this will help address root causes of malnutrition and help ensure that you have more sustainable change. It's also encouraged to build on past N4G commitments, especially those from Tokyo, and look at where those could kind of be enhanced and further kind of improved and sharpened with new targets perhaps. And also really to look at how will commitments respond to national priorities, national targets, and also where possible national budgeting and accounting systems for accountability. And also, as mentioned by Johan, to look at all forms of malnutrition where applicable, but that is the case in most countries of the world. You have multiple forms at the same time, and also to align with commitments of other stakeholders relevant to the same country where possible. Next slide, please. Then there are also some requirements for commitments that are really kind of mandatory for engaging at the summit, presenting at the summit, or to be included in the compact. And these are that commitments must be aligned with the N4G Paris principles of engagement, which we will unpack very shortly, and also to be correctly registered in the NAF, which is managed by the Global Nutrition Report, that they should be smart and that they should be monitored, including really describing how commitments will be monitored and reported on annually through the NAF. And we will hear much more about all of these all of these points from the Global Nutrition Report later in this webinar. Next slide, please. So wherever possible, it's really recommended in country to hold national consultations to formulate commitments. We know that this is already happening across. Previous slide, please. The one on national consultation. Okay, it's there. Thank you. So we know this is already happening in many places, but just wanted to flag that there is a dedicated section in the guide that provides guidance on how to do these consultations, including a checklist with questions that could be ticked off. That could be helpful for country stakeholders seeking to do that. So overall, it's recommended to really look at how to set up this inclusive process to consult around the commitment under government leadership, to review existing national nutrition policies and programs, look at where the gaps are, where barriers are to progress, to further improve nutrition in each country, and to review evidence on how to overcome them and really kind of base the commitment on that. It's encouraged to use existing multi-stakeholder platforms where they exist, which we know it does in many sun countries, but also beyond that, and to see how that could be built on. And as well to look at how to broaden an inclusive consultation process also with participation of those most impacted by malnutrition. Could also include children and youth, for example. So really looking at how to make that as broad as possible where that is achievable. And also finally that commitments should be evidence-based, and also to look at how to protect from unwanted influence and conflict of interest in that commitment-making process. Of course, governments are in the lead and will make the final decisions on the commitments, but that input from a wide stake of stakeholders will enrich the process. Next slide, please, on principles of engagement. So, as I mentioned, the principles of engagement have been developed to guide stakeholders who want to make commitment at the summit, and this is really to improve trust and to manage conflict of interest. And there are some fundamental principles that build on the Sun Movement principles of engagement that you can see on the screen that are kind of guiding the engagement overall by all stakeholders who want to engage at the summit. And next slide, please. And then there are also binding rules that all stakeholders must respect to be able to make a commitment at the summit. Some of those are mainly relevant to the private sector, as you can see, but some are relevant to all. And I will not read through all of them because it's a lot and I have limited time, but I wanted to flag, as you can see, they have to do with respecting human rights and really fundamental ethical considerations, including, for example, fully complying with the International Code of Marketing of breast milk substitutes, and similar things. Next slide, please. But you can consult for the full list, where they are now in the guide, so please do consult the full list there. I also wanted to touch on the thematic annex guides that I mentioned earlier. So these are, you have the overall commitment guide, which provides this overall guidance on how to make a smart commitments and the principles for the N4G summit in Paris. Then 6 thematic sessions have been developed under the leadership of UN agencies with input from nutrition stakeholders, including governments and also civil society, to kind of guide more specific commitment making around the 6 main themes of the N4G summit. And these themes are health and social protection, transition to sustainable, climate smart, resilient food systems, resilience to crisis, gender equality, data research, AI and innovation, as well as financing and accountability for nutrition. So there is a guide, in-depth guidance piece developed for each of those 6 themes. They have a similar format. So each of them contains a brief background with evidence, a brief section on why these commitment areas are really strategic, are really kind of essential to move the needle on malnutrition. It contains a 1-page call to action with broad recommendations within that area, like what is the change we want to see in health systems, for example, or in the finance and accountability space. And then it also contains tables with specific examples of what sound commitments could look like in each of those thematic areas. And on the next slide, we will have a look at what this could look like. Next slide, please. So this is just one example from one of the thematic guides. Here you see from the health and social protection document. And as you can see here, the commitment examples are very concrete, very specific. It's looking at kind of specific change in this sector to kind of integrate nutrition and kind of move nutrition within that area. And it has example commitments for different stakeholder groups. So you can see government, donor, civil society, and also at different levels. So global, national, and even sub-national level. So those are kind of very rich examples. These thematic guides will be available very soon. Unfortunately, they have been a little bit delayed, but they're available very soon. And also, and support will be available as well if anything needs to be clarified around those guides. So I'll stop here because I know time is tight, but we're definitely available if you want to ask any questions around these, what I just presented here. Over to you, Grania.
Thank you so much, Marie. What a rich presentation with so much content. Again, reminding all of you online, we will share the slides, we will share the recording. And thankfully, we have been able to post these references now in the chat. So do take time after today's recording to go back to work with your colleagues who are pulling together these commitments and pull out the areas that are important to you. Lots of rich information and solid examples there. And of course, there are commitment guides being generated by a variety of sectors working on different global coordination fora too. So there is definitely a lot of resources out there for this process. Now we're moving on to our third speaker. I'm delighted to welcome Barbara, and Barbara Ravender is going to speak to us on mobilizing and amplifying ambitious commitments through advocacy action. So Barbara, over to you.
Thank you very much, Grania. Can I have the next slide, please? Thank you. So yeah, we've heard from Marie that the commitment guide recommends to hold really inclusive consultations in order to come up with the commitments at country level. And on this slide, I want to insist on the importance of including civil society in mobilizing these commitments so they are not only smart, but also meaningful. And why? Because N4G is civil society is playing this key role, which have summarized with this acronym GRASS, which resonates with grassroots. And the G is for grounded in reality. Civil society can really ensure that commitments are informed by the lived experience of those people who are affected by malnutrition. And therefore, it ensures that the commitments that are made are relevant and have impact by addressing the real needs and challenges of communities on the ground. The R is for reaching stakeholders and decision makers. Civil society has this unique sort of niche of creating these inclusive spaces for diverse voices to be heard. And for example, in the process leading to N4G, we have been heavily involved in the Nutrition Dialogues Initiative, which is being led by an organization called 4SD and World Vision International. And the Sun Civil Society Network was a mobilizing partner of this initiative, which has led to over 400 dialogues being held across the world. And we really encourage you to look at these dialogues. There is a platform online, and we will be sharing the link after the webinar. And you can find there all the summaries of those really important discussions. And there should really sort of fit into the processes leading to commitments at national level. Then the A is for advocating for smart commitments, really ensuring that these commitments are ambitious, but also they are practical and really results-driven. The S finally, or almost finally, is about shaping momentum. Civil society here again has a really key role to play in sustaining the momentum through leveraging traditional media and modern media to sustain the attention and ensure that nutrition is high on the agenda, and that there is really also a build-up of political and public support towards the nutrition agenda at country level. And last but not least, accountability. It's really key to really ensure that commitments actually translate into results, because we're not making commitments for the sake of commitments, but we want them to be followed up to be tracked to ensure that progress is being monitored, that there is transparency over challenges, and that there is a possibility to course correct if needed. So we really encourage you to build accountability within all the commitments that you're making at country level. Next slide, please. So to support your mobilization from a civil society perspective, but that's also applicable to other stakeholders, we've put together at the Sun Civil Society Network toolkit which link will be shared afterwards. Oh, I see it's shared already. Thank you very much, Peter. And in this toolkit, it's really intended to support mobilization at country level. It's intended to be this one-stop shop for all the summit's resources. It's being updated regularly with all the new resources that are being published. It provides you also with the guidance and templates to facilitate engagements with diverse stakeholders. You can find letter templates, social media toolkits, guidance to write blogs and op-eds to sustain the momentum towards the N4G summit. So the call to action here is really to explore this toolkit, utilize these resources, and then make sure you connect with us if you need some support or clarification. And also, please do share your experience and good practices so we can really sort of all together build this momentum towards the N4G summit. Next slide, please. Okay, and that's my last slide. I just wanted to insist on the fact that real change really starts from where we stand. And it's really important that we all make commitments, all stakeholders have the possibility to make commitments. It's not only governments. And here, there is really an opportunity to lead by example, and civil society's leadership can really send a strong message to governments, donors, and other stakeholders to really step up and follow suit. So really our intention is to create this ripple effect and drive meaningful change. And last but not least, I mentioned it already, but please ensure that commitments really embed accountability from the start. So commitments are just the beginning, and it's really what they're delivering on that matters. So with that, I'll stop. Back to you, Grainy, and then I'll hand over after to my colleague Edgar, who is our Sun Civil Society Alliance Coordinator in Kenya.
Thank you so much, Barbara. Again, another fantastic, rich presentation. Lots of content, definitely needs to be unpacked in these groups that are working together, supporting governments. And indeed, an important point, it's not just about governments making commitments. We all, as different players in the sector, need to be developing smart, ambitious commitments to achieve the SDGs. So thank you so much for all that information and for showcasing why this is an important moment in time to come together. Now I'm delighted to introduce our next speaker. And Edgar Rojas is going to share with us his experience from a country very close to my heart, and a country that has also made a lot of progress on nutrition. So Edgar, from sunny Nairobi, please share with us your experiences of commitment making. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Grania, and I'm happy to see you after a very long time. So good morning, good afternoon, and good evening from wherever you're joining us from. I'd like to share what we are doing in terms of mobilizing of the N4G commitments, and I'm going to start our experience from the regional level and how that now links to what's actually happening at the national level. Yeah, so for us at the regional level, that is the East and Southern Africa region, we've come together as civil society and established an N4G accountability platform. And this enables us in terms of being able to hold our duty bearers, but also ourselves accountable to the commitments that we are making. But also this platform provides us an opportunity to be a resource to ourselves in terms of sharing experiences from different countries. And then we went ahead and we also came together to be able now to meet and discuss on what exactly we needed to do. And as one of the top things that needed to be done was to review the previous commitments that our countries made and try to evaluate what really happened. And that now led us to developing various position papers. So these position papers have actually enabled us to be able to engage at various national levels. And I'm happy to report that various countries actually received these position papers with a lot of positivity, because then it highlighted in terms of some of the challenges, but also the solutions that they needed to make. Next slide. And then because we also needed to make N4G institutionalized within various regional communities that we are engaging with. As one of the regional communities that we engaged with was the East, Central and Southern Africa Health Community. And this brings together various health ministers to congregate together and discuss and also make resolutions related to health that we're going to implement in their various countries. So for us, what we did is we did a lot of high-level advocacy, and I'm happy to report that N4G was one of these resolutions that were made during the 73rd Health Ministers Conference. And the reason why we are really happy about this is because now it gives us the high-level political commitment that we have, because then if the people at the forefront, that is the high level, the health ministers, then it's much more easier for us to be able now to work with them and also be able to engage on how then do we also become accountable on issues of N4G. Secondly, we also now in the process of signing an MOU with the EXA Health Ministers Conference, so that we be part and parcel of how then do we support in the implementation of these resolutions, but then also how then we also support them at member state level in terms of accountability issues. So that is one thing that is ongoing, and we believe that this MOU will provide us with the roadmap, but also the mandate that we need to be able to support at the regional level. And then the second one is the Africa Leadership for Nutrition, something that also we are working with, and there is part of the Africa Development Bank to be able to support member states, be able to formulate smart commitments. And this week, AUC is going to make a regional level, continental level commitments towards N4G, courtesy of the support that we provided as civil society. Next. And now I want to really dig deep into what we are doing in country. And we took Kenya, and Kenya, we've gone through a 5-stage process in terms of ensuring that we really come up with the smart, measurable, but also context-specific commitments that we can work with. So the first stage that we did was to sensitize various stakeholders on N4G, and this was done during a nutrition technical forum. And the Ministry of Health actually took lead in this process. For us, we just facilitated, but also provided the technical support that was required in terms of the information that was needed in terms of how then do we sensitize various stakeholders on what N4G is all about, and also why is it important, and more importantly is why do we need to make these commitments. And then the second stage that we did was to use our position paper and be able to disseminate it, because then it was also critical that we disseminate the position paper that we developed widely, so that we will be able to identify some of the challenges and also the solutions that we needed. And then we went ahead and did 3 workshops. And the reason why we had the 3 workshops, because we wanted to have different stakeholders being sensitized and also being engaged at different levels. So we had the private sector, whereby we engage very broadly with them in terms of really why do they need to come in terms of making N4G commitments, and then the civil societies also in terms of how then do they play their role in terms of accountability, but also the youth, and also because then we know in terms of the role of the youth in championing for nutrition. So we also had an engagement with them to be able to ensure that this process was seamless, and to integrate community voices. Yeah, so we had 7 nutrition dialogues, and Barbara mentioned this earlier. So for us in Kenya, we had 7 different dialogues at community level, just to collect and collate community voices, so that it's because at the end of the day, all these commitments actually affect and also influence what's happening at the community level. So we felt that having community voices being integrated in this process was really critical to ensure that we have a much more comprehensive process. And then lastly, now we are now planning for 2 multi-sectoral engagements, and the first one will be done on the 17th, and this will just be to finalize the commitments that we have from different stakeholders, and then we're going to have another multi-sectoral engagement on 21st of February to now validate all these commitments before they are actually registered on the NAF. So we also had some side discussions, because then we felt that they were also very, very critical. One is to have a continuous touch base with the embassy of the French embassy here in Kenya. They're the host, France is the host, and we felt that we really needed to be able to engage them very closely for them to also have as a resource, technical support, also just to be on the know of what's happening. And they have been very, very courteous to ensure that they support us, and we have weekly touch base with them. And then the second one was to also have continuous engagement with the SUN focal point here in Kenya, and also meetings, regular meetings with the head of nutrition, because there are so many moving parts, and also she needed to be updated on what exactly is happening, so that she can also provide the guidance that is required. And then lastly, we did not stop at that. We also having the next slide. We're also having discussions in terms of what is it that we're going to have post the N4G engagement. And this discussion is ongoing at the regional, but also at the national level. And one of the things that we're planning to do is to roll out an N4G accountability tool at national level, because this now will also help us start to monitor and track the implementation of the N4G commitments, and also be able to identify some of the gaps and the support that is required that we can also be able to offer. And we'll also be generating routine reports and position papers on the implementation of N4G commitments. So this will be an ongoing process over the next 4 years to be able to engage with various stakeholders in terms of just ensuring that we provide the right data, but also ensure that there's documentation on the implementation process. So I want to stop at that in terms of how and what we are doing, both at regional level and also at national level. Back to you, Grania.
Asante Sana, Edgar. I think that was fantastic, and really important that you're also looking forward on the what next. It's not just one moment in time. This is a continuous process. So I'd like to welcome all our speakers to come back and put the video back on. So Johan and Marie and Barbara and Edgar. We're going to take a few minutes to take a first round of questions from our 140 participants online. So Johan, there's quite a few questions on, and of course, no surprise, people would all love to go to Paris, but what is the process for being invited or inviting governments? And, is it worth turning up? And also, what is the update on the side events? We've heard a lot about side events, Village of Solutions. If you could give us an update on if decisions have been made on these different sessions, and even if they have been made, who gets invited, and if there are any resources available to support any travel. So thanks, Johan, over to you.
Thank you, Grain. So starting with the main summit conference, the list of organizations, governments that are invited is already set, has been set by France, and the invitations are on their way. So maybe your organization or your country already received it, or since it's transiting through French embassies, it may come in the coming days. Invitation at ministerial level, and for organization, they are for executive directors, and each invitation specifies how many number of access badge the delegation will have. So it varies depending on the type of stakeholder. So it's not possible for anyone to just come and join in the main conference, but there will be other events that are more open. So other part of the program, I mentioned the Village des Solutions, Village of Solutions for Nutrition before. This one will be open to the public on the 26th of March, its first day. There will be also a series of side events. So side events are now being selected after a call for application, as I was saying. Once the program is available, you will also be able to see what is the registration process to attend the side events. Some side events may be open, some side events may be with more restricted participation. Did I answer all your questions? Great.
Yeah, and perhaps, Johan, for those of us that won't be able to travel to Paris, are there ways to, will it be streamed on YouTube? Are there
Very
recordings?
good question, yeah. So it's indeed planned to be streamed on YouTube.
Wonderful. So for all of us online who won't be making it to Paris, there will be a YouTube link so you can hear real time the different sessions. So we look forward to receiving that information in due course. Now, I think, Marie, I'll come to you. There's a question, and actually I'll read it out from the Foreign and Commonwealth Development Office of the UK government about the importance of integration of nutrition across sectors. We all know that unless we approach nutrition in a multi-system way, in a multi-sector way, we're not going to achieve those reductions, we're not going to achieve those SDGs. Now, FCDO is proposing to bring commitments together under a joint compact on nutrition integration, part of a wider N4G commitment, and through that bring together a coalition to take implementation of commitments forward through existing networks like SUN. And this compact will be launched at N4G. And for those interested in being part of that with the UK government, we will share Doreen's contact, and you can let her know. However, Marie, from your perspective, and perhaps also Barbara, how can our preparation work to develop these commitments? How can we come together and make sure we are addressing the multi-system approach and bringing in, so it goes beyond the health sector, and bringing in agriculture, bringing in WASH, bringing in social protection? Do you have any suggestions on what resources could help our country delegations to achieve that?
Thanks, Grania. I can definitely make a few proposals, and Barbara and others can add. I mean, so definitely, I think for some countries, this is already quite an established way of working. With most some countries will have a multi-sectoral nutrition plan in place, and in some cases they need to be updated, which could make N4G a really great opportunity to look at, how that can be updated, and kind of what further action is needed across these different sectors to kind of see this change that is needed. In other countries, this process might not be as well established, so then N4G could even be an opportunity to kind of bring different government actors who represent different key sectors for nutrition, so health, agriculture, water and sanitation, perhaps you might have education, social protection. So kind of coming together to discuss what kind of commitment could make sense, and how could our different sectors contribute to kind of achieve progress on nutrition. And then I've seen or heard of some countries already thinking about that, having a bit of a plan in place. So who is going to support taking that process forward? So who can support on the social protection side? Okay, so this part of government, and also maybe, okay, can any UN agencies come alongside to provide technical assistance, any other stakeholders who can support, and have a plan not only for monitoring and evaluation, which is needed to submit N4G commitments, as we've heard, but also how will this be taken forward in country? So I think these are some thoughts, but happy for Barbara and others to add to that.
Thank you, Marie. I think you've said it all. I just want to re-emphasize that indeed the integration of the different sectors for nutrition policy is at the heart of the SUN movement. So I would really emphasize the need to build on what's already there, especially for SUN countries. You can use your multi-sectoral and multi-stakeholder platforms to mobilize commitments, and be inclusive in the commitment process. That's really key, to have commitments that actually reflect the needs and challenges and the realities of communities on the ground, and of people who are actually affected by malnutrition. So that would be my contribution. Yeah.
Thanks, Barbara and Marie. I think that's some very helpful tips, and it's really important that we use the opportunity of N4G to bring these sectors together to have meaningful change to improve outcomes for vulnerable groups. Edgar, Kenya over the years has made progress. Stunting levels are reducing, inclusive breastfeeding rates are increasing. What tip can you give from your experience in Kenya to other countries and other colleagues online who maybe this might be the first time they're developing commitments, or maybe they don't know where to start? What would be your takeaway message to these countries in your role in Kenya that can inspire them?
Yeah, thank you so much, Johnny. And that is really a critical question. And for me, one of the things that I've seen work is in terms of using already existing government structures. And this is coordination. Coordination is really critical in terms of being able to bring different players together so that we can discuss how to move nutrition indicators, and also how now to act, and also how to avoid a lot of duplication that actually happens. But also it's also critical that government is taking lead. When government takes lead, then it's much easier to be able to discuss and chart our way forward. Community engagement is critical. And for us, we've made very intentional decisions in terms of being able to ensure that communities become the center of our implementation. And that's why when we implement and roll out the baby-friendly community initiative, when we work on the community health strategy to ensure that we have community dialogues, to ensure that we have community action days, it makes it easier for us to be able to scale interventions, but also it makes it easier for us to be able to monitor what works and what doesn't work. And I just cycle back in terms of coordination. It also helps us in terms of monitor how our indicators are actually faring. So for me, the three most important things is one, coordination. Two is making government, enabling government to be able to take lead, putting communities at the center of implementation. So for countries or for stakeholders who are planning to start the process of making commitments, we need to be able to ensure that the stakeholders, first of all, are sensitized to be able to understand what N4G is about, because then that now enables them to be able to have much more meaningful engagement, because then they'll see the sense of the reason why they need to make this commitment. So sensitization is really critical, but then also being able to have a center where you can be able to have technical guidance on how commitments are made. So for me, sensitization and having technical guidance to be able to be availed. Yeah, thank you, and back to you, Granny.
Absolutely insightful, fantastic comments, Edgar. I think all of us are taking away a lot from that. And without governments in the lead, we cannot make progress and we cannot be accountable. So I think it's great suggestions from your expertise in Kenya that we will all take with us. Johan, I'd like to come back to you. We've had a question on, do we have insights on any big commitments that might be in pipeline? Because it is a way of advocating to others, putting a little bit of gentle pressure, either from countries or big donors. Do you have any insights that you could share with our participants online on if there are such pieces of information available, and if so, how can they access that information?
Thank you, Grenier. So not all commitment makers are making their commitments publicly available now. Some are registering their commitments in the Nutrition Accountability Framework, but not communicating on it yet to announce them at the summit. Others are having a different strategies and have already publicly communicated on their commitments. And that's the case of the Kirk Foundation that communicated on their commitment, the first at Roland Garros last year. Canada has also just recently communicated and announced part of their commitments, over 370 million Canadian dollar, I believe. And so, yes, announcing commitments is up to the country, but it's something that can be also visible, making your commitment visible to announce them early, and they are relayed by the social medias of N4G. So also, if you want to know what others are making and what are the commitments that are made available. Follow the N4G social media channel, the social media of the Secretary General Briopon, that will give you an update on what's happening. And if you also want some visibility for your early commitments, please, you can communicate on it officially, and then it will be relayed by the N4G team and others and all of us here. Just to say also that all commitments should be registered in the Nutrition Accountability Framework for accountability. So make sure that if you announce the commitments, it is also registered appropriately in the NAF that Carrie will present later. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Johan. And again, that's the key point. And the next session will really take us through that process. Unless the commitments are registered, they're not real. So really make sure that we follow through with whatever commitments are made. They need to be registered in order for them to be acknowledged. And then in order for all of us to be able to hold ourselves and our government counterparts to hold them accountable for those commitments. Now, in terms of accountability, there's one last question I think we'll focus on. A few points have come through on how do we actually monitor commitments, and how, for example, can routine data be used to track commitments, and what happens when you have commitments around nutrition and social protection? You know, they're two different sectors. How potentially can we monitor those? Would any of the speakers, any of you, like to share your thoughts on some of the monitoring, bearing in mind we will be going through the Nutrition Accountability Framework in a lot more in depth in the next session. But if anybody would like to add any insights at this stage.
I mean, I can say just a word or two, and then I think Carrie had her hand up as well to add on to that. But I think definitely routine data from national systems could and should absolutely be used to report. I mean, of course, there would likely be some kind of system of aggregating that data. And ideally in country as well, you'd have kind of regular review moments to kind of look at where things are on those different indicators. So N4G commitments can actually be an opportunity to kind of give more visibility to data and accountability, which we all know is so important. Those of us who are like nutrition data people who are interested in that. So it can actually be an opportunity to really put the emphasis on that, to see where are we now, where do we need to go, and what's the data telling us. So it's all about kind of linking the commitments, I guess, to the existing data that exists in country, whether, okay, so if it's a commitment on social protection and nutrition integration in those, I mean, what kind of tracking system exists for social protection, and how can we have maybe the right, you know, maybe it's about having the right nutrition indicators within that system so that we can capture that kind of progress is made on integrating nutrition or whatever the commitment might be on. So that's a few thoughts, and Carrie or others might want to add on to that.
Sure. So in terms of the question about routine data and tracking commitments, spot on. And actually, Granier promised everyone some tips and tricks about registering their commitments. And so I might come back to this. In the Nutrition Accountability Framework, once a commitment is registered, then there are periodically moments when the Global Nutrition Report will come to those who have registered commitments and ask them for an update on their progress. And in fact, routine data and demographic health surveys and everything that you do at a national level or subnational level to keep track of how things are going in nutrition in your country, that data is vital for being able to then respond when GNR reaches out and asks you to report your progress in the Nutrition Accountability Framework. You need that data in order sometimes to respond to how you have progressed on your commitment. So it's absolutely critical, absolutely important. You know, the DHIS, all of that information is really, really useful when it comes down to reporting on your progress. So we know that there's been some emphasis on trying to prioritize investments in nutrition data systems. We went to a great webinar yesterday, and we really hope that some of those making commitments will commit to those routine data and to those surveys, so that commitment makers can then show that they have made progress against the commitments they've made.
Great, thank you so much, Carrie. And that's so vital. We need data systems to be functional and produce quality data to be able to hold ourselves account for these commitments. So if we don't have those, that has to be a really important commitment to consider. Now, one final question before we move to our last session. Obviously, we are recognizing there is flux with the global financing situation for nutrition. So within the advocacy toolkit and the various resources that are available, and that Marie and Barbara you mentioned, and also Edgar, is there any messaging specifically that can help, given we are seeing shrinking ODA, and how to make sure that we continue to get the level of resources and investment in nutrition that is required to achieve our SDGs? If anybody would like to take that.
I mean, I can kick us off on this, and just to mention that, yeah, indeed, we released the advocacy toolkit a little bit before the announcements that are leading us to this unfortunate situation, or rather to an increasing unfortunate situation. But just to say that, yeah, some messaging is there indeed to support financing nutrition and to showcase how nutrition is so front and center and fundamental to human capital, and therefore to human development and to country development. But indeed, it's a very good point. And we are updating this toolkit regularly, as I mentioned. So we'll be definitely working on specific targeted messages to address this specific question, because I think we all need that. Yeah.
Thanks so much, Barbara. And I think the recent World Bank investment framework has a lot of great key messages that we can use to continue to advocate for investments in nutrition. Whether or not the shrinking ODA, there'll never be enough financing, so we need to continue to advocate for investing in nutrition. So now, Carrie, we're going to move on to your session to take us through, okay, we have made our commitments, what next? How do we register them? Please take us through the session. Thank you.
Sure, next slide. So the Nutrition Accountability Framework, for those who don't know, launched in response to planning for the Tokyo Summit. It is all about registering and monitoring smart commitments. To us, we would say you've made a commitment if you've registered it. So the NAF ensures that nutrition commitments are captured, trackable, and transparently monitored. Next slide. So in a SMART commitment, so SMART meaning specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound, there are 20 ingredients. There were 20 ingredients. There are now 19 ingredients that are really necessary in order for commitments to be SMART. So we need to know things like a description of the commitment goal so we can understand what it's about. We need to know your one primary indicator to measure progress of each goal. We need to know your baseline and target level and your start date and end date for your commitment. So these are the ingredients for making up a SMART commitment, and it's actually a good reference. This is a good reference slide for when you're going through and reviewing what you've prepared. Again, the bold ingredients are the ones that are required for a commitment goal to be trackable. You will see a red X on one commitment, which is who are the additional stakeholders. We are no longer tracking additional stakeholders as part of a joint commitment because there were clearly some issues about accountability, who is accountable for that commitment. So we are no longer asking that question. We've actually streamlined things as much as possible. Next slide. So to access the NAF platform, you will either need to sign up if your organization does not have an account already, or you will need to sign in. Here is the link for the landing page to access the platform to register your commitments. If your organization is new to the platform, you'll need to create an account. And it's really best that there be one account per commitment-making organization. So if you have trouble getting into your account, or if you're not sure if you have an account, If you need help with account access, there's the email address to reach to ask for support. Next. Once you have actually signed in, next slide. Once you've actually signed in, then you can go ahead and start completing the commitment registration form. The form, as you can see over on the right, that circle tells you you can view the form in English, Spanish, or French. We strongly recommend completing the form in English if possible, so that you maintain control over the translation. The form itself has 5 sections based on the SMART criteria or SMART dimensions, but we actually begin with R for relevance. You will see throughout the form, follow-up questions will only appear if they're triggered by an earlier response. Next slide. So why do we start with relevance, even though that's later in the word SMART? So it's because that's the things that people are most excited to tell us about. For you to get a good score, for the commitment to have a good score on relevance, you need to say which global nutrition target it directly or indirectly contributes to. We honestly considered only allowing one target because there's a lot of pressure to try to prove impact. But having a lot of feedback from those who did the pilot testing, we agreed to go ahead and allow you to check more than one indicator. And it sort of makes sense, right? Because obesity, you might be interested in obesity and diabetes and blood pressure and intake of salt. All of those, you might be tracking all of those with your commitment. The other thing we need to know in relevance is if you want this to be considered for N4G, which N4G thematic area does it relate to? Next slide. So specific, the S in SMART. So you need a clear commitment title and a description, and we need to know the type of commitment that it is. You will be asked to respond to questions about geography and population targeting. You need to have the stakeholder name and type that will already have been taken care of in your process of signing up for your account. This section really sets the course because it asks for a focus on one primary indicator by which the commitment will be measured. So in all of your narrative and everything else you provide, really recommend you focus and think, what is the one thing that we will want to be using to show our progress? What one indicator? Next slide. So measurable and time-bound, those go in the same section together. So with a focus on that one key indicator that will be used to measure progress, we need to know the baseline level and year, the target level or value, and if there's a monitoring plan. Are you collecting your own data? Is someone else collecting the data? It also asks the start and end date for the commitment. Again, try to make sure these things make sense together and align as you're entering them into the online survey form. Next. Okay, making commitments achievable. So checking whether or not a commitment is achievable is a pretty complex process. And so those who set up the nutrition accountability framework to begin with came up with, are the resources required going to be there? So this section, we have actually streamlined it a little bit to make it easier. So it just asks, have the total costs of doing this commitment been estimated? Have you lined up funders? What is the funding mechanism? And how much of the funding has been secured? Have we secured most of it? Have we not started yet? So that is how we would measure whether or not your commitment is achievable. Okay, and next slide. So once you are almost done with your survey form, at the end, it asks you if you have any additional information and feedback. Is there anything else that we need to know about your commitment? And then when you're finished, make sure you click the submit button. And you should get an email that says that your commitment has been received. Please be available because the GNR team is going to review your submission and might contact you if clarifications are required. And also please be aware that the information that you have shared will be published in the NAF tracker. Whether it's an N4G commitment or not, it will appear in the NAF tracker. So only share information that you are willing to have publicly available. There were previously some questions about confidentiality in the old version of the form. We are not asking those anymore. The NAF is supposed to be an accountability mechanism, and so information that is shared besides your email address or public personally identifiable information, the information that you submit will go up online. But we will have a process of several months where we will be talking to you, going back and forth with people to ask questions and get clarification. Okay, next, I've just taken you through all of the, basically most of the online form that you have to fill out. We have some tools to help you. That online survey form does not easily allow saving of progress as you go. So it is good to prepare your information in advance and then go into the form, into the login and put your information into the form, into the survey form. So we have provided an instructional video, which provides step-by-step instructions, sort of like what I just did, but more detailed, for registering the commitment in the NAF. Because we have uploaded that on YouTube, on our YouTube channel, it allows you to auto-translate via subtitles in dozens and dozens of languages. So here are some instructions about how to set up those subtitles if you are not sure how to do it, or if you haven't done it before. Next slide. And perhaps most importantly, again, before you go into the online form, you might want to refer to the reference copy of the form and prepare your answers in advance. The PDF is available in English, French, and Spanish, and you can actually type your answers onto that form before going later to transfer them into the actual online survey platform. We didn't want to cause confusion by allowing people to type on the form because we cannot receive these forms as a submission of your commitment. But we thought it would be helpful for people to be able to sort of plan in advance before they go to the online survey, again, because the online platform does not allow saving as you go. It's recommended if you're doing more than one commitment that you register one commitment and submit it, then go have dinner or go have your cup of coffee, come back, do another commitment. Okay, next slide. Commitment registration timelines. I know there will be a lot of questions about this, and just to say that presently these are the dates that have been agreed to and committed to with France. We are having some discussions, but for now, understand the platform launched December 20th. We are right now doing just some very basic, very high level checks of information. We are not doing that whole assessment of smartness at this time. February 28th is the last date to be considered for the Summit Compact Annex that is shared at the Summit. Subsequently, there will be other copies of that Summit Annex. We will update as we go. After February 28th, we really get into the detailed verification and the smartness assessment. So going through the SMART and those different ingredients I showed you and scoring for smartness. And then June 30th is the last date to be considered for N4G Paris. So please have your commitment in by June 30th if you want to be included in the final list of who committed for N4G Paris. Then we have committed to Sun that by November, we will be ready for dissemination. So at the Sun Global Gathering, if you're going to be participating there, that is where the information will probably first be disseminated overall. Okay, Granier, over to you.
Great. Thank you so much, Carrie. I think that was really, really helpful, very practical, step by step. I have a couple of questions, and those of you online, please post your questions. You have direct access now to Carrie, the expert of this, so to use this time wisely. So maybe the first question to you, Carrie, is for the stakeholders part of the form. Are we outlining stakeholders who are sponsoring for leading in the delivery, or what is meant by stakeholders?
Sure. In terms of stakeholders, if there's anything you're seeing on the form right now that says stakeholders, that really means commitment makers. The form that I've just walked you through is about who the commitment maker is. If you want to mention any other stakeholders who are involved, you can feel free to include that in the description, but we are no longer asking you who else might be involved. We know things can change. We know plans can change. We know later, maybe now you have a funder you wish that you had profiled when they first, when you first put your program together. But the stakeholder in our context of the NAF means commitment maker. That is who registers the commitment. I do want to, can I answer Natalia's question also at the same time?
Yes, please go ahead. Yeah.
Okay. And yeah, no, it is not obligatory. I know in some other mechanisms, for example, FP 2030 might be that way, that everything goes through the government. It doesn't have to be a government organization registering a commitment. If you are registering a government's commitment, yes, it needs to be a government entity. But a CSO can register, a UN entity can register. Commitment makers come in all stripes, and you will see when you look at the form to sign up, you will see all the different types of commitment makers that there are. There's about a dozen different types of commitment makers. So whoever is going to do the work of the commitment, register the commitment, and follow up and respond to requests for progress reports, that is who should be uploading the commitment.
Great, that's clear. So another question from Magdalena. Where in the registering process can I choose that I want to register a domestic or a national pledge?
Yeah, it's actually through who you are. That is, so if you are a non-governmental organization, if you are a government at any administrative level, and you are operating in a non-donor capacity, then it would be considered a domestic or national pledge. If you are a donor government and you are registering, that means you're registering a commitment for activities outside your borders, then you are considered a donor government, and you make your commitment that way. It is complicated for some of the major donors who also make commitments to their within their borders. They usually do that by having one government entity register their commitment as a donor, and a different government entity registering their commitment for research within their country.
Perfect.
I hope I've answered the question.
Now, the last slide, and perhaps we can put that last slide up again. I think there's a lot of valuable information in that last slide. So the feedback was it's very helpful. But to confirm, in order for governments or heads of state to share their commitments at N4G, so at the actual summit, they need to submit by February 28th. So if they do this, is there a target amount or a sort of a floor amount, I guess a minimum, of pledge that they need to make in order for it to be publicly reported or shared through the plenary? I don't know if that's between you, Carrie, and Johan to advise on that.
Yeah. Johan, can I offer a trick for the first part, and then you could maybe see if you have anything to say about the second part? Okay. So I have in terms of submitting by February 28th, there are different ways that this is being handled. If you actually want to appear in the compact annex, then you would want to register by February 28th. However, lots of people, we've heard Canada mentioned, we have heard Kirk Humanitarian mentioned, we've heard different actors mentioned who had not yet registered their commitment, although I haven't checked yet about Canada. But there will be options, and Johan can speak to this, there will be options for mentioning your commitment at the summit, and then you will need to give your information so that GNR can follow up with you and make sure that you actually register your commitment. But just wanted to mention that there is maybe a little bit of a trick. People are announcing their commitments all the time, whether they announce them at the summit, whether they've registered them. Ultimately, though, to be part of this overall accountability mechanism that N4G called for, you do want to register in the NAF in order to be counted and accounted for and appear in the summit annex. But Johan, you want to answer the rest of it?
Yeah,
And if you're not sure, I can try.
Not about the NAP, but in terms of announcing commitment in the plenary session. So the plenary, we're still like other friends with the International Advisory Group is still thinking how this plenary will take place. And the idea is not to have a series of pledges announced at the plenary, but is more to have discussions on the content and of the thematic on nutrition, on the challenges through panel discussion. So there won't be necessarily announcement of commitments in the plenary. The thinking is that commitments should be announced in a press room or in a side event. So there will be other opportunities to announce it, and also the speaking slots won't be determined only based on the level of commitments that are made.
Great, thanks, Johan. So coming to the close now, Carrie, two questions. One is, what is the role of the stakeholders after registering the commitment form, so once it's gone in? And then from me, what happens if we've submitted our commitment, then the event happens, then there's a decision to edit it and revise it? What are the processes for going back in and revising commitment? Thank you.
Okay, in terms of what is the role of stakeholders after registering their commitment, there are two roles that we know, three we know for sure. One is that you should be available to answer questions. The Global Nutrition Report may send you questions asking for clarification. We already know some questions that we have to ask those who have already submitted. Secondly, is to be available to make sure whoever you register, whatever email address you use to register your commitment, be sure that you're actually going to be there to answer questions. Because in 2026 likely is when you would get asked to report on your progress. And that will be very important. So your role of your stakeholder after registering the commitment is to be available to answer questions, to be available to report on progress next year, and then finally actually implement, right? Your main responsibility is really to make the thing happen and implement the commitment. Before I go though, so Granier, if somebody in that verification and smartness assessment process, likely we will be coming to people and asking questions, and that will cause changes in the commitment. So whatever shows up in the N4G compact that is shared at N4G will not be the final one, because there might be some adjustments. And then I forgot, Grania, do I have time to share the trick that I mentioned but didn't actually talk about? So when I asked about on specific, clear commitment title and description and type, France has two types of commitments for them. They say they're political and they're financial. If you're making a political commitment, there are three types. One is enabling, one is program or policy related, and one is impact related. I'm going to tell you now, and based on what has happened lately with potential funding for large surveys, we learned in the last round of progress reporting that impact commitments, to actually change stunting or to actually change anemia or to actually change obesity, those commitments, people felt a lot less comfortable reported in. We had a lot fewer reports at the impact level. We had much better reports about financial, about enabling, and about programmatic or policy level. So that's just my tip. Think about whether or not you would actually have the impact you're looking to have, and maybe don't choose that type of indicator for reporting on. Stunting is a hard thing to change. Over.
Thank you so much, Carrie. And we have just come to the 19 minutes. So I would like to thank you all so very much, all of you online who actively engaged, and all of our speakers for their rich presentations and providing us with all the tools and information needed for all of us to go back and work with our counterparts and register smart, ambitious commitments so we can get back on track and achieve the global nutrition targets. I would also like to thank the team at the back end who have been facilitating the webinar from the Global Nutrition Report and the Sun Movement for really making sure this was a success. And I hope all of you online are inspired to move forward to make and register, don't forget to register, smart, ambitious commitments. And as mentioned at the beginning, we will be sharing the recording from today, which includes translation in Spanish, and from the similar meeting held yesterday where we have a recording in French, along with the links and the slides, so you can use them as you support your counterparts to make commitments moving forward. So thank you all very much, and goodbye.